If you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I do a lot of videos on how to use head tracking for monitoring spatial audio with headphones. And I originally started with the Waves NX head tracker and then moved on to the RG Labs do-it-yourself head tracker. And most recently I've done some videos, or at least one video, with the Supperware head tracker, which is really nice. And whenever I do a video with a head tracker, there's always the same question that I'm getting, and that is, can I use a head tracking device for creative purposes? Meaning, can I use them in such a way that my head movements control certain parameters in my digital audio workstation or in my music production? And the quick answer to that is yes, you can. And it's actually not that complicated to do. And that's what I want to talk about today. But before I do that, first of all, hello, everybody. In case you're new here, my name is Michael Wagner. I teach at the Antoinette Westphal College of Media Arts and Design at Drexel University in Philadelphia. And on this channel, I talk about digital media, game design, and spatial audio. If any of these topics interest you, then please consider subscribing and don't forget to press the like button because of YouTube algorithms. If you have any questions or comments, please use the comment section below or join my Discord community. An invite link is in the description below. And with that being said, let's get into some creative head tracking. I'm going to demonstrate the basic principles in Ableton Live, and the head tracker that I'm going to use is the Supperware head tracker. Now, what I'm going to show you today works similar in other digital audio workstations and with other head trackers. However, the plugins and the software that you might need to use might be different. If there's any interest in me showing you how to do that with other DAWs and with other head trackers, let me know and I can certainly do some follow-up videos. However, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to stick with Ableton Live. And the project that I'm going to use is essentially the same project that we used last time when we demoed the Supperware head tracker. And that is simply a MIDI clip with an Ableton Live instrument. Let's just have a brief listen how that sounds. And what we're going to do is we're going to essentially use the head tracker in order to control the filter cutoff and the panning of the track so that we essentially have some creative control on the production by moving our head around. The first thing I need to do is I need to connect my head tracker, and I'm going to use the DT990 Pro again. And the reason for that is because they integrate very well with the Supperware head tracker, because they allow me essentially to put the head tracker inside the headband, which is nice. So let's just put the head tracker in. So I'm going to open up the headband here, and then essentially I'm going to take the Supperware head tracker and I'm just going to move it in here. And let me just kind of wiggle that in and then essentially close it up again. And then we are essentially ready to go. There are two more things I need to do. The first thing is I need to start the bridgehead application, and the bridgehead application is responsible for translating the information that comes out of my head tracker into something that the digital audio workstation can understand. And then essentially I need to connect the head tracker to my computer via USB. And as soon as I do that, I should essentially get the connection message, and I see the dummy head, and that is now essentially connected, and I see that everything is moving correctly. Now, what the bridgehead application does, it essentially translates all the information that comes out of my head tracker into something that is called an OSC message or an open sound control message. And that is an open standard that allows audio applications to communicate with each other. And all we really need is a plugin or some other device that allows us to take these OSC messages that are coming out of the bridgehead application and use them in order to automate anything that I want to really in my digital audio workstation. So let's go back into our Ableton project. Unfortunately, Ableton has a Max for Live device that can receive OSC messages. And the reason it has this device is because this is the receiving end of a touch interface solution. So if you have an iPad, for example, and you have an application that you can use as a touch interface for Ableton, the messaging that between the iPad and Ableton Live is done through OSC messages. And the Max for Live device that comes with Ableton is essentially the receiving end of that communication. And because OSC is just the same thing for a touch device as it is for our head tracking device, we can repurpose that Max for Live device in order to work with our head tracking application, with our bridgehead application. So let's just drop that OSC device into our track. Now for that, we just need to search for touch OSC. and that once again is a Max for Live device, and we're just going to drop that in. And as you can see, there are a couple of things that we can set here. First of all, we need to set the OSC addresses. Those are the addresses that the device is listening to. So essentially we need to set that to the information that is coming out of the Bridgehead application, and then we can map that to certain parameters in our Ableton Live setup. In order to make that work, the first thing we need to do is we need to make sure that the Max for Live device listens to the same port as the Bridgehead device is sending. And for that, we need to first set the profile in our Bridgehead application. So let's go into the Bridgehead application and let's go to the bridge settings. And in the bridge settings, we need to select the profile. And there are a couple of different profiles we can choose. Now, the one that is most useful in this particular case is the yaw, pitch, roll profile, because that gives us the most obvious way to control our sound, right? We could use quaternions if we wanted to, but quaternions are a mathematical construct, and my head movements are not that easily translatable to the way quaternions look like. So, if you're very experimental and you want to kind of try out how to do things, you can certainly work with quaternions as well. But it is certainly more obvious what's going to happen if we use simply yaw, pitch, and roll, right? So these are the three fundamental dimensions in which we can move, rotate our head. And the nice thing here is also that it is learnable. That essentially means that we can isolate certain messages in order to make sure that Ableton Live actually knows which messages to listen to, so that it can actually learn what these messages are and essentially connect correctly. Now, once we've selected yaw, pitch, and roll, we see that the port that the Bridgehead application is sending to is port 8000. Now, this could be changed in the settings of Bridgehead, but we don't really need to do that. We can simply change that in the settings of the Touch OSC device. Now, the Touch OSC device by default listens to 7099, so let's just change that to 8000. And that essentially means that it is now listening to the same port that the Bridgehead device is sending into. And then we need to teach the Max for Live device the parameters that it should listen to. And for that, we're going to use the teach option here. So we're going to select essentially the teach. And the first thing we're going to teach is the yaw. And select until you see yaw here, and then essentially we're going to click on the learn button. And as soon as we click on the learn button and we move the head, essentially we see that the Touch OSC device has learned how to read the yaw information. So let's disable that again, and let's go to the next one. That's the pitch. So let's click on the second one, and that's now connecting to the pitch. And then essentially let's go to the third one, which is the roll. And let's do that. And then we have the roll. So we have all three parameters here. And then let's just make sure that we turn teaching off, because as long as we have teaching on, the Bridgehead application is only going to send out that particular parameter. So if in the current settings, for example, it's only sending out roll information and not pitch and yaw. So let's turn that to off. Now, unfortunately, there's a little bug in there, and I was not able to kind of find a workaround for that for some reason. And that is that everything works perfectly. However, the Touch OSC application is not reading the pitch information. I'm not quite sure why that is. Bridgehead is actually sending out correctly. I could confirm that, but the Touch OSC Max for Live device for some reason refuses to read that. So for the moment being, all we really can do is we can listen to yaw and roll, but we can't listen to pitch. If you want me to investigate that further, or if you have any solutions, please let me know, and I can certainly look into that into more detail. But for the purpose of this video, we're just going to work with yaw and roll. Now, in order to make that usable in our Ableton Live set, all we really need to do is we need to map these parameters to the parameters that we want to automate with these OSC messages. And let's say, for example, we're going to use yaw in order to control the panning of our track. So what we would have to do is we would have to click on the map button here and then essentially select the parameter we want to map this to, which in this case is the panning of the track. And as soon as I do that, I can see that when I move my head, essentially the panning is also changing in that particular way. Now, if you want to use that as a way to mimic head tracking, then this is actually the wrong way, because what I'm currently having is, if I'm moving my head to the left, it's also panning to the left. If I'm moving my head to the right, it's also panning to the right. However, in head tracking, that's just the other way around. So if I'm moving my head to the left, essentially the sound source would actually pan to the right. If I'm moving my head to the right, the sound source would pan to the left. Now, this is actually something that we can correct by simply changing the min and max settings in the Touch OSC device. So instead of going from 0 to 100, we can simply say we want to go from 100 to 0. That essentially inverts everything. And as soon as I do that, let me just kind of click on 0 here. As soon as I do that, I see that if I'm moving my head to the left, the panning is going to the right, and if I'm moving my head to the right, the panning is going to the left. And this should essentially mimic head tracking. And quite frankly, you could also use that, for example, if you have a binaural renderer that does not have a head tracking option, you could actually use that in order to add head tracking through OSC messaging later on. So you can use essentially a plugin like Touch OSC in order to take the OSC messages that are coming out of the bridge device and in order to automate the essentially head rotation in the binaural settings, and that would allow you to essentially add head tracking to any binaural renderer that allows you to automate the head orientation. Now, the second thing we're going to do, and that's just for creative purposes, and once again, we can't really use pitch for some reason. I apologize once again. If you want me to find out why and how, then let me know. But for the purpose of this video, that's fine. We're going to use roll. So we're going to map the roll parameter, and let's map that to the filter cutoff. So that when I'm moving the head in this direction, I am essentially closing the filter. If I'm moving it in the other direction, I'm opening the filter, and that now essentially together with the panning allows me to control the sound. So let's just see, or let's just hear how that sounds and what I can do with it. So let's just start the track. So if I'm now essentially moving my head in this direction, I'm closing the filter. If I'm moving it in the other direction, I'm opening the filter. And if I'm moving my head, I essentially get the same effect as if I would have regular head tracking, meaning that in your particular case, because you're hearing exactly what I'm hearing, you hear that as a panning effect. So if I'm moving my head to the left, you should actually hear that as a panning to the right. And I obviously can combine those. And that way I can control my Ableton set with head movement. How cool is that? Now, obviously, this is a very creative way of doing things, and probably very limited applications of doing that. However, there are some of you out there that are interested in experimental applications of head tracking, and that's certainly a way to go about. And one thing that I wanted to just kind of add is that while kind of it might look like something that is slightly weird, kind of controlling the set of a digital audio workstation with my head movement, there are actually applications that are interesting. And one thing that you could do, for example, is if you're using the RGLab head tracker. The RGLab head tracker has the benefit that you can actually connect multiple RGLabs or multiple head trackers at the same time, and that essentially means that instead of tracking your head, what you could do is you could track your hand movements. Obviously, you're only getting kind of orientational information. You're not getting kind of all 6 degrees of freedom. You're only getting 3 degrees of freedom. But you could do that for both hands, and if you do that, you could create something like a very inexpensive version of Imogen Heap's musical gloves. So this is actually something that I might actually look into if it's something that interests you, and if you want to see me how to create those, let me know, and I can do a little maker project. I haven't done any maker project anyway, so that would actually be quite interesting. Now the thing is that this is actually very inexpensive, so the circuitry that's in there is like $20. So you get really, really inexpensive musical gloves. How cool is that? Now, this is really everything I wanted to say today. If you found that video interesting, once again, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. If you have any questions or comments, let me know either in the comment section below or join my Discord community. And with that being said, see you at the next video.